Hey, good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing good. Today, we're just going to talk a little bit more in depth about spark plugs, how they work, and what you might be able to tell if you remove your spark plug and take a look at what's going on. It might give you some information as to why an engine's not running well or at all. So real quickly here, just some parts of spark plug. We have the terminal, which is the metal area up top that actually connects into the spark plug wire or boot. We have the insulator. This is the ceramic part. This just makes it so that you can't get shocked and that the metal piece that runs down through is insulated from the outside. We have a gasket, which is kind of like a metal washer here, and this is just going to make sure we get a nice tight seal when the spark plug is in, that no air is escaping out of the compression chamber, the cylinder. We have the threads. There are different types. We have the center electrode, which is a little metal piece that sticks up out of the end of the spark plug. And then we have the side electrode here, excuse me, the little hook part. And it's between these two areas right here is where the electricity actually jumps, where the spark is made. That's going to be igniting the fuel. Okay, so that area is really the area that we're concerned with. So just some quick things. Not all spark plugs are the same. There's a lot of different types out there. Too many to really talk about here totally. For small engines, though, we're generally looking at two different types. We have a shorter style spark plug and a longer style. Okay, and we call the length of that the reach of the spark plug. You can see we do have some different diameters here, and there are some differences between different types of engines, like overhead valve versus flat. So overhead valve engines tend to have a longer reach. This is because we have that longer head section, right? The valves are all in the overhead there, and so it's just a longer, deeper section. So this needs to stick a little bit further in. What we really need to happen is for the spark plug to get as close to the top of the piston and the top of the compression chamber without actually hitting the piston. If it's too far away, so if you have the wrong length or reach of spark plug, then the spark may not actually reach the fuel. If you have too long of a reach, then it's actually going to get smashed by the head of the piston, and that can actually damage or break the spark plug. So there are a couple of different thread diameters. They tend to be metric, even though here this is talking about wrench size for the hex up here. But the most common ones are 12, 14, and 18 millimeter thread diameter. There are others besides those, but those tend to be the most common. You can find a chart like this online if you look up the manufacturer. So I think this is for a Champion spark plug. You can see it does have some codes here, and the codes talk about or tell what type of resistor or metal is in there. It will tell you the size of the threading of the spark plug. A lot of them also have a heat range, so the amount of heat that spark plug can take or generate is different for different applications. So, for example, spark plugs in a car would be very different from spark plugs in a small engine. Okay. And unfortunately, from one manufacturer to another, the codes are not the same at all. So if you do go and need to go shopping for some type of spark plug, then you really want to try to match exactly what you have, or you'll need to find some kind of a cross-reference chart online. So, for example, if you can only find NKG spark plugs and you have a Champion, you might just have to say, hey, what's the equivalent here? And somewhere you'll find a chart that'll tell you that info. Okay. So with that in mind, you just want to match the spark plug identically if you can, or on the back of the packaging of a new spark plug, it might tell you which ones it replaces. So, but you do want to be precise there. Okay, so some things that you might see. If you actually remove the spark plug, or you're having some kind of trouble where you think the engine is not functioning well and it may have something to do with spark, here are some things that you might most commonly see in small engines. So number one would be that you might find an oil-fouled spark plug. So it would appear kind of dark and kind of sticky or tacky, like a goo. And typically this might mean that you either have too much oil in a two-stroke mix. So I think we've talked about two strokes. One of the most common mixes these days is 50-to-1, but older models might have been a 40-to-1, or I have a chainsaw that's a 24-to-1. It's a pretty old saw. But if you don't mix that properly and there's too much oil in the mix, then it might start to corrode or kind of seal out the two metal parts here. If those metal parts are not clean, then the spark is not going to work properly. A bigger issue is that this might also tell you, though, that you're getting oil up into the combustion area, and that would mean that you have some worn or broken rings, or maybe you actually have too much oil in the crankcase. Too much oil means that it might, again, be getting forced up into the cylinder area because the oil has no other place to go, and you've just way overfilled the engine. So another common thing would be gap bridging. So this would appear kind of like a crusty buildup, okay, maybe kind of rust looking. And what's happening here is that we're actually getting dust and dirt and other stuff inside of the cylinder, and that stuff is not really combusting because it's, you know, rock and stone, and it's just kind of caking up around the spark plug there, okay. And again, as that buildup kind of builds, you're just not going to get good connection between the spark plugs or between the two electrode pieces there. You might be able to fix this just with some cleaning, but this usually means that you know, dirt and dust are getting in. So check your air filter. Either it's really clogged or it's not on. You may need to clean that out. Most of the time, you can kind of rinse out filters or bang them out. So you may even have just a missing air filter altogether. You may also have a clogged muffler or spark arrestor. A spark arrestor you'll typically find on two-stroke engines, and it's just so that because they're so small, sparks will actually shoot out of the muffler because it's such a small muffler. So the spark arrestor just helps to make sure that no live sparks are getting out that might catch something on fire. Pretty common in chainsaws, and this is definitely something that needs to get cleaned out every once in a while because it builds up with carbon. So here we have one that shows some mechanical damage. So this is where the spark plug itself has actually been hit or banged on something. Again, this would probably mean either that you put in the wrong length of spark plug. So this would happen pretty quickly. This would also possibly happen if your spark plug was loose. So if it either loosened up over time, or maybe you were working on something and you didn't remember to tighten it all the way back down, and then you started the engine, maybe it ran, and then something happened here. So, but typically that means that it hit the piston. So either you put in the wrong spark plug, or if that spark plug has been in there for a while, and all of a sudden now the engine won't run, that could mean that you might actually have a loose connecting rod or a broken connecting rod. That means that the head of the piston actually went up too far and actually smashed into the spark plug here, which would be pretty bad news because it means that you're going to have to replace that connecting rod. All right, and then finally, the last kind of common one that you might find in a small engine is going to be this carbon fouled. So, you know, this might look similar to the oil fouled, but it's going to be more of a powdery look to it. You know, if you wipe it, it probably will come off in your hand as a powder rather than a sticky substance. And again, this could also mean that you just have too rich of a fuel mixture. This could just be a carburetor issue, though. So this could mean that the choke is stuck in place, and so you're getting a heavier fuel and low air ratio. This could also be another sign that you have some kind of a blocked air intake. So either you could have a block in a valve area, or again a block in a filter, or again choke plate stuck or something along those lines. So you know, but this, you should be able to clean this up, but you're also going to want to try to find the source of the problem and check out that filter, and you know, check out some of your linkages. You know, we talked about some reasons like squirrels getting in your equipment and gumming up some of the links and things like that, and that could make the choke or something else stick in that kind of a position. So, okay. All right, I hope you learned a little something here. Next week, I'm going to have a little challenge for you. We're going to try to have everyone take a spark plug out of an engine at home and take a picture of it and upload it. So have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.